In other movie rumor news realm, the Amazon Lord of the Rings show has caused a bit of controversy lately. I don't know if you've seen anything about this, but basically this is all starts off of like kind of rumors. I mean, it's been, I think, mostly confirmed that this is for the show, and it still sparks the discussion. But basically some job listings went up for like a nudity coordinator in regards to an Amazon project, like the code name of the project or something. And past that, I believe some casting calls went out for actors that were okay with showing nudity on screen. And if this was anything other than Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's work, I don't think anyone would be paying much attention to it. That being said, it has actually caused, within the Tolkien community, it has caused a bit of an uproar, because I have to agree, not agree. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but is that where we're going? Like nudity in Star Wars, sex in Star Wars? And that's kind of the sentiment that a lot of people
in Star Wars or Lord of the Rings?
Did I say Star Wars? Yeah. Bro.
You're still on Star Wars. You're obsessed.
Dude, I'm obsessed with Star Wars.
You're trying to become a Star Wars journalist.
I'm just really trying to be a Star Wars YouTuber.
You're really reaching for those stories.
You just like, that's what Star Wars YouTubers start doing. They're just like, so in other news, the new Star Wars of the Ring story has popped. There's going to be sex in Star Wars where Aragorn and Galadriel get it on with rings and by the way Thanos is in Star Wars now. But yeah, it's one of those things where I guess basically the sentiment is people are starting to wonder if Lord of the Rings TV show is going to try and harness the viewership that Game of Thrones did. And the answer is absolutely yes, 100%. They have to, or this series doesn't succeed.
Well, I think it's a bad idea, personally, for Star Wars to go.
Star Wars?
Oh, God. Dude. Yeah. I think it's a bad idea for Star Wars to go Game of Thrones style.
Star Wars.
It's also a bad idea for Lord of the Rings to go Game of Thrones style. Just completely threw off my train of thought there. No, I think it's a bad idea, but I think they're going to do it anyway, because if you look at the sort of like the middling success of The Hobbit, I think studio-wise, they're going to think Lord of the Rings isn't going to work again. Like just doing that Lord of the Rings tone, that Lord of the Rings feel isn't going to work again. What is going to work? What's going to be Game of Thrones? And I think that's a bad idea for Lord of the Rings if you're looking to keep something feeling like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
If you want it to feel like Middle-earth, if you want it to feel like Tolkien, having nudity in Lord of the Rings is gonna throw you off a little bit. Like the Twilight Zone remake show that Jordan Peele did.
Mm-hmm.
Twilight Zone, it came out in the 60s. They weren't really allowed to have profanity in them. The new show was, letting them fly, which is fine for any show, whatever. As a Twilight Zone fan, it felt really weird watching Twilight Zone, hearing that theme music, and then just hearing a bunch of F words after that. It felt a little bit weird. It just felt so not with the spirit of the show.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're going to have a similar feeling with Lord of the Rings.
And I feel like that with Lord of the Rings. However, I think there's a more nuanced discussion to be had with, and it doesn't just have to do with Game of Thrones and the success of Game of Thrones. Amazon bought this show because they wanted their own Game of Thrones. Like that, there was no question about it. They wanted to do Game of Thrones for Amazon. They need a big budget show. I think they spent like $3 billion on it. So I understand what they're thinking is we need to appeal to as many people as possible, which means we don't have the room to go out on a limb and do something artistic. We don't have the room to go out on a limb and do something unexpected and hope for success. That's what we would want as artists and as consumers that want to see new and engaging creative things. But with the money involved and all these executives that are probably looking down on it, they're just going, we have to put together the Frankenstein's monster that people will love the most to reach the most people so we can make back all this money we're spending on it. They've already signed on for like 3 seasons too. So I understand what they're thinking. I don't know if obviously just something like nudity is what is needed for Lord of the Rings to be successful.
Well, it's not just going to be nudity. They're going to go hard with the violence too, for sure.
That was what I was going to head into, is that what I think this is more indicative of is there is a new rising popularity of extreme violence in a lot of these TV shows on these platforms like Netflix and Amazon and HBO. Everyone's taking after HBO. So they're going to lean into that. I'm not opposed to leaning into the violence, but mainly because Lord of the Rings, the original series, already did it.
Yeah.
They didn't go super gruesome, but they did lean into it more than probably Tolkien would have. And if you want to get into what Tolkien would have wanted, he really didn't lean into the violence. He took a very wide scope in the books of it. He was just kind of like, yeah, and then there was a battle and a siege that lasted a few weeks, and there was some fighting and a lot of people died and moving on.
Yeah.
It really wasn't like these hour-long sequences, and that was a choice that the movies had to make, and I'm okay with them making them. So I don't want to criticize them going with extra violence. But the nudity thing I do think is a little bit too far, because Tolkien was a devout Catholic. Not only that, I believe there are some quotes of his. I forgot to prepare them, but they're like quotes of him literally talking about whether or not he would want something like love, sex involved in his works and his view on it. So the idea of bringing it in belligerently in a possibly nasty or chaotic way,
right,
or gruesome way,
bringing it not just as an artistic decision, but as a, like, this is what the market has right now.
Game of Thrones went hard with that kind of stuff. And, Lord of the Rings has a little romance in it, a little bit, but it's very much like, it's very hands off. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, and these people liked each other. They loved each other. They got married. It's really hands off. It's very kids gloves with it. But, I do think that it is a step too far, personally. And I don't think people are going to be happy about it. And I think you actually need that fan base. Star Wars. Lord of the Rings has such the fan base that I think you need them to really get it on board. Because if you look at something like, this isn't totally related to Lord of the Rings, but there was that Tolkien biopic that came out with Nicholas Hoult. And it did okay. And it wasn't a great movie as far as I've heard. I haven't watched it. But they didn't have the support of Tolkien fans.
Yeah.
The fans already knew that it wasn't going to be true to Tolkien. And it wasn't. And they knew that going in, so they didn't support it. And not that, obviously, a TV show can reach new people. I'm not saying it would be just like a biopic, but you really need to think about that kind of thing. But I don't know. I think Amazon's going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to that, because there's too much money on the line. I think that's the end problem. There's just too much money on the line to leave anything to chance. And so they need to see these, what's popular and these trends, and they really got to capitalize on it, because this is their shot. They're putting out some good shows right now, but this is their big shot for taking over the streaming space, and they have the property to do it. I think Lord of the Rings can do it. I think Lord of the Rings, I hate to speak some heresy here, but can absolutely destroy everything that Game of Thrones did. Because Game of Thrones threw it all in the trash with their final season, but also because the actual stories that this show is supposedly going to go down have so much room for really engaging plot lines, characters, and absolutely iconic sequences. There's so much globally that's happening in the Second Age, which is when they're supposed to be shooting. I know, Tolkien nerd here. Not everyone knows, but
oh yeah, the Second Age. I got it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Second Age
comes after the first.
Does it come after the first?
And before the third.
Before the third. Got it. So I'm glad that you're the Tolkien expert here. Yeah. But yeah, it's a thing where there's so much potential for it that I think that the story is, assuming they can keep an integrity to the story and the production and acting up to par like Game of Thrones did, I think they can blow it out of the water, because they have a story that they can work with. Martin didn't finish the Game of Thrones books, and they had to go out on their own, and they were also adhering through the first 5 seasons. They were adhering to his books. With the Second Age and what they're going to do with this series, it's very broad outline. It's very historic. It's like reading a history text. They're like, yeah, these people went here, did this thing, fought a battle here. This person fell in love with this person, then got betrayed in this way, blah, blah, blah. There's so much room to just write in.
Yeah.
That if they do it right, they have all the material in the world. But I think that element of walking the line with trends is going to be their hardest thing, because it's not just Game of Thrones that has leaned into that violence, and that
every show.
It's ever since this dawn of this age where there's so many series that are the biggest ones are all on these streaming platforms. It's not on TV anymore. And they're allowed to do things that you couldn't do back in the days when you were on TV. I mean, the amount of shows that like and I knew I was a kid when I had TV, but I was never involved in like watching really mature content when I was a kid. I never saw it. There just weren't, it wasn't as accessible. Now you have Netflix. You can watch like some of the craziest, most edgy content. And you look at it, I mean, the Watchmen series has leaned into it. Game of Thrones really set it off. The Boys is on season 2. That show is so out there in terms of just the belligerent, gruesome violence, sex, language, subject matter, etc.